You plan the perfect trip. Yosemite National Park. Waterfalls that thunder down granite cliffs. The kind of place people describe as heaven on earth. You're with your family, your best friend, living a dream vacation. But what if the most beautiful place on earth was hiding a nightmare? In 1999, 3 women vanished on a Yosemite getaway. Their rental car was found burned, bodies locked inside. At first, police thought they had their killer, but the truth was far more twisted. And the man responsible? He wasn't a stranger in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight. Carole Sund was a loving mother, 42 years old, from Eureka, California. She had built a life centered around her family. A successful businesswoman who never let work get in the way of what mattered most. Her daughter Juli was her world. That February, she wanted to give her daughter Juli, just 15, a trip they'd both remember forever. It was more than just a vacation. It was a chance to bond, to step away from the routine of daily life, to show Juli the kind of natural wonder that stays with you forever. Joining them was Silvina Pelosso, Juli's 16-year-old friend from Argentina, staying with the Sunds as an exchange student. Silvina had come to America full of excitement and curiosity, eager to experience everything the country had to offer. The Sunds had welcomed her like family. This trip to Yosemite was meant to be the highlight of her stay, a chance to see one of the world's most breathtaking landscapes. The 3 of them set off with high spirits. They planned to spend several days exploring the park, hiking the trails, photographing the waterfalls, breathing in the pine-scented air. They checked into Cedar Lodge, a modest motel just outside Yosemite's gates. The kind of place travelers trust. Clean rooms, friendly staff, nothing to fear. It wasn't the Ritz, but it was comfortable, affordable, and perfectly positioned for their adventure. The staff seemed nice. Everything felt safe. But that trust would be their undoing. For the first couple of days, everything went according to plan. Carole, Juli, and Silvina explored Yosemite's magnificent terrain. They stood beneath El Capitan, that massive granite monolith that draws rock climbers from around the world. They hiked to Bridal Veil Fall, felt the mist on their faces. They took photos, smiling, happy, unaware that these would be the last images ever captured of them alive. Carole called home regularly, checking in with her husband, sharing stories of their adventures. Everything was perfect. But then the calls stopped. When Carole didn't call home as planned, her husband Francis grew uneasy. At first, he told himself not to worry. Maybe they were out of cell range. Maybe they'd decided to extend a hike. But as the hours turned into days, that unease transformed into dread. Days passed. No word. No sign. Francis contacted authorities. A missing persons investigation began. But in a park as vast as Yosemite, with its endless wilderness and countless trails, where do you even begin? Then, on March 18th, on a remote road in the Sierra Nevada foothills near Don Pedro Reservoir, more than 2 hours from Yosemite, searchers made a discovery that turned dread into horror. Carole's red Pontiac Grand Prix sat burned out and blackened, deliberately torched. The windows were blown out, the paint was charred, and inside, the smell of death. In the trunk, investigators found 2 bodies, later identified as Carole and Silvina. They had been there for weeks, hidden in plain sight on a lonely stretch of road that most people never traveled. The cause of death was clear: strangulation. Both women had been murdered, their bodies placed in the trunk, and the car set ablaze in an attempt to destroy evidence. But Juli was missing. For weeks, hope flickered. Maybe she had escaped. Maybe she was still alive, being held somewhere, waiting for rescue. The FBI launched a massive search. Search dogs combed the wilderness. Helicopters circled overhead. Volunteers scoured every trail, every campground, every hidden corner of the park. Carole's husband held out hope. The community rallied. But deep down, investigators feared the worst. Soon, another grim discovery came. On March 25th, near the same reservoir where the car had been found, a park ranger spotted something in the brush near the water's edge. Juli's body, hidden beneath branches and debris, her throat cut, 3 lives snuffed out. A dream vacation had become a nightmare. The FBI swarmed Yosemite. A triple homicide in one of America's most iconic national parks, and one of the victims an international visitor, meant pressure to solve the case fast. The media descended. Headlines screamed of danger in paradise. Tourists canceled their reservations. Park officials worried about the future of Yosemite's reputation. Investigators worked around the clock. They interviewed hundreds of people: park rangers, motel staff, other tourists who had been in the area during those fateful February days. They combed through evidence from the burned-out car, searching for DNA, fingerprints, anything that could lead them to the killer. The case was baffling. Who could have done this? And why? The women hadn't been robbed. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was deliberate, calculated, brutal. As leads dried up and weeks turned into months, frustration mounted. The FBI knew the killer was still out there. But who was he? Then what seemed like a breakthrough. Investigators focused their attention on 2 ex-convicts with criminal histories. Men who had been in the Yosemite area around the time of the murders. The evidence seemed to fit. They had violent pasts. They had no solid alibis. Soon, arrests were made. 2 ex-convicts were paraded as suspects. Press conferences were held. The public believed the nightmare was over. Families breathed sighs of relief. Tourists began returning to Yosemite. But behind closed doors, doubt lingered. The evidence wasn't as strong as investigators had hoped. Details didn't quite add up. And as the case against these men began to crumble, a terrifying reality set in. They had the wrong men. The real killer was still out there, walking free, blending into the background of everyday life. Summer came. Tourists flooded Yosemite again, unaware a predator still walked among them. The park tried to move forward, to reclaim its reputation as a place of beauty and peace. Then, in July, just 4 months after the Sund Pelosso murders, lightning struck again. Joie Ruth Armstrong was 26 years old, a naturalist who loved Yosemite with her entire heart. She worked for the Yosemite Institute, teaching children about the wonders of nature. Her students adored her. Her colleagues described her as bright, passionate, full of life. She lived in a small cabin near Forsta, on the edge of the park, surrounded by the wilderness she cherished. On July 21st, Joie's cabin became a crime scene. A colleague stopped by to check on her when she didn't show up for work. The door was open. Inside, signs of a violent struggle. Blood on the floor. But no Joie. A search began immediately, and within hours they found her. In a nearby creek, her body had been dumped. She had been brutally murdered, decapitated in an act of savage violence that shocked even seasoned investigators. This time, though, the killer had made mistakes. Witnesses had seen Joie the day before, talking to a man outside her cabin. He was driving a blue and white International Scout SUV. Several people had noticed the vehicle, distinctive, unusual, not the kind of car you forget. Someone had even written down the license plate. And that license plate led straight back to Cedar Lodge, the very motel where Carole, Juli, and Silvina had stayed. Suddenly, the pieces began falling into place. The same location, the same time frame, couldn't be a coincidence. Investigators focused their attention on the lodge's employees. One by one, they interviewed the staff. And one name kept coming up, a man who had been working there during the time of both crimes. Cary Stainer, the handyman, the quiet, awkward man who fixed broken toilets and changed light bulbs. The guy no one really noticed, who kept to himself, who seemed harmless enough. Cary Stayner was 37 years old. He had worked at Cedar Lodge for years, living in a small apartment on the property. Coworkers described him as odd but polite. Guests barely remembered him. When FBI agents showed up at Cedar Lodge on July 24th with a search warrant, Cary didn't run. He didn't resist. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. At FBI headquarters, in an interrogation room, Cary Stayner confessed, in chilling, methodical detail. He told them how he had seen Carole, Juli, and Silvina checking into the motel that February night. How he had watched them, followed their movements. How he had knocked on their door late in the evening, pretending there was a plumbing problem in their room. They had trusted him. He was staff. He was supposed to be safe. Once inside, he overpowered them. He strangled Carole first, then Silvina. Both women fought, but he was too strong. And Juli, he took her separately, driving her away in the rental car, keeping her alive for hours before he finally killed her too. He described burning the car, hiding the bodies, returning to work the next day as if nothing had happened. And Joie? He admitted to that murder too. He had seen her cabin, had fantasized about her, had shown up at her door with a knife. She fought harder than he expected, but in the end he overpowered her too. For women, for lives stolen, and all because a killer had been hiding in plain sight. But the twist didn't end there. Cary Stayner wasn't just another killer. His last name should have rung alarm bells years earlier. He was the brother of Steven Stayner, the boy kidnapped in 1972 by convicted sex offender Kenneth Purnell, held captive for 7 years, and rescued in a case that made national headlines across America. Steven's story was one of survival and heroism. In 1980, when Purnell kidnapped another young boy, 5-year-old Timothy White, Steven knew he had to act. He escaped with Timothy, walking miles to a police station, saving the younger boy's life. Steven became a national hero, the subject of a TV movie, a symbol of resilience and courage. But what about Cary? While the world celebrated Steven's return, Cary became the forgotten brother. The family focused all their attention on Steven's recovery and healing. Cary was expected to just deal with it, to be happy his brother was home. But inside, something was breaking. Cary later told investigators that he had been having violent fantasies since he was a child, long before Steven was kidnapped. He fantasized about kidnapping women, about killing them, about the power it would give him. He claimed he had been sexually abused as a child by a family friend, though this was never fully verified. Steven's kidnapping made everything worse. The family's trauma became Cary's invisibility. While Steven struggled to readjust to normal life, Cary's darkness grew deeper, more twisted. In 1989, Steven Stayner died in a motorcycle accident at just 24 years old. Another tragedy for the Stayner family. But for Cary, it was another layer of complicated emotion. Grief mixed with resentment, loss mixed with a sick sense of freedom. 4 years, Cary worked low-level jobs, drifting from place to place. He eventually landed at Cedar Lodge, where his dark fantasies finally became reality. Cary Stayner's trial began in 2002. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His confession, physical evidence linking him to all 4 murders, witness testimony placing him at the scenes. His defense team tried to argue mental illness, pointing to his troubled childhood, his brother's kidnapping, the family trauma. But prosecutors painted a different picture. A man who knew exactly what he was doing, who had planned and fantasized about these murders for years. In the end, the jury agreed. Cary Stayner was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Today, he sits on San Quentin State Prison's death row, awaiting execution. though California's moratorium on the death penalty means he will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The Sund family was shattered. Francis Sund lost his wife and daughter in one horrific act. The pain was unimaginable. In the years that followed, he became an advocate for victims' rights, channeling his grief into action. Silvina's family in Argentina was devastated. She had come to America with dreams and excitement, and she never came home. Joie Armstrong's friends and students mourned a woman who had dedicated her life to sharing the beauty of nature with others, only to have that life violently stolen. Cedar Lodge eventually closed, unable to shake the stigma of being the place where a serial killer had worked and hunted his victims. And Yosemite? The park moved forward as it always does. Nature doesn't stop for human tragedy. The waterfalls still thunder. The granite cliffs still gleam in the sunlight. Today, Yosemite is still a sanctuary of beauty. Families hike its trails, stand in awe of its waterfalls, and feel safe in its silence. But the story of the Sund family, Silvina Pelosso, and Joie Armstrong lingers, a reminder that danger sometimes hides in plain sight. We like to believe vacations are escapes from fear, that the people we meet, the waiter, the tour guide, the hotel clerk, are trustworthy. Most are. The vast majority of people we encounter are good, honest, normal. But in 1999, that trust was betrayed in the darkest way. Evil doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always look like the monster we imagine. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it smiles politely. Sometimes it knocks on your door pretending to fix a leak. Carole Sund wanted to give her daughter a memory they'd cherish forever. Silvina Pelosso wanted to experience the wonders of America. Joie Armstrong wanted to share her love of nature with the world. They went in search of beauty. Instead, they found horror. And their killer? He was there the whole time, smiling, watching, waiting. In the end, Cary Stayner was caught. Justice was served. But 4 lives were lost. 4 bright lights extinguished by a man whose darkness had been growing for decades. Remember their names. Remember their stories. And remember that even in the most beautiful places on earth, we must never let our guard down completely. Because sometimes, the nightmare isn't in the wilderness. It's in the man holding the key to your room.